Hello world, this is Lisa Friedrichsen, your friend and professor from Johnson County Community College. In today's short screencast, I'm going to dive into float a little bit deeper and find out what happens to a parent container when all the elements within it are floated. And the short answer to that is the parent container collapses to nothing because all of the elements have been pulled out of the normal flow. But to demonstrate that, let's go to this page I've mocked up and let's see what this looks like. So what I have here is one image and 4 paragraphs. I'm using some lorem ipsum text placeholder. And by the way, if you ever need placeholder text, you can go to lipsum.com and it explains the background and history of why we use this placeholder text and also lets you generate it very quickly should you need it. But on my web page, I've also added ones and /ones to the end of the first paragraph, twos to the beginning of the second paragraph, /2, 3/3, and 4/4, because as we do this demo, we're going to be moving these paragraphs around. I wanted it to be very clear where the paragraphs were at in the web page. For the HTML, here's what it looks like so far. I've just got my required tags. I've got my head section. Instead of my standard comment, I'm using a meta tag. It's a little bit swifter, because search engines will note that my name is the author of this page instead of using a comment to do that. I'm also using an embedded style sheet. And of course, we wouldn't use an embedded style sheet normally, but for this little demo, tucking the style sheet directly in the head section of the web page just makes it more convenient. Our wireframe is really super basic, and I'll just collapse these paragraphs. I've just got 3 paragraphs and an image in my main section and 1 paragraph in my footer section. And that's what you're seeing here, the image, the 3 paragraphs, and the footer section. For my styles, I've used a background color of yellow for my main section, and my favorite style to see my blocks, a 1 pixel red solid border for my footer, just so we can clearly see what's going on here. Float was originally created to help text and images go side by side. An image is an inline element, but because the paragraph is a block element, it's going to want to start on its own block. It's not going to want to take this extra space. To make the first paragraph use the extra space provided by an image, we need to float the image. And I can float it left or right. Let's float it left. Save, refresh. And now this image has been removed or lifted up out of the normal flow, and the paragraphs that follow can use this extra space. We want to remember, however, that every paragraph still takes up an entire block. It's just that the block for paragraphs 1 and 2 partially is hidden by this white background color of my image. I'm going to now delete my image and just work with the text and show you how float on a paragraph works a little bit differently than float on an image. When we floated the image, we just had to say float left, and the next paragraph used the space that was created. But here we have paragraph 1, 111, lorem ipsum, and if I address that in my style sheet, I'm talking to an ID. So my selector is going to be # or hashtag, however you like to say that, float left. Okay, what am I expecting to have happen? Really, nothing happened in terms of the paragraphs going side by side. And that is because each one of these paragraphs is a block element. If it's a block element, it spans the entire width of the parent container. So nothing is in fact floating. On block elements, such as paragraphs, I also have to set a width. And so let's say width of 35%. Save, refresh. Now I'm getting a floating effect. Here's paragraph 1, paragraph 2, and paragraph 3. But here's really what I wanted to show you with this demo. If I float all 3 paragraphs left, I have floated all 3 elements inside my main section. The background color to my main section is yellow. Watch what happens now if all 3 paragraphs are floated left. Where did my yellow background color go? And furthermore, why do I have the red border that supposedly surrounds the footer showing up at the top? And that is because when you float all of the elements inside a container, that container collapses to nothing. So the moral to the story is that you probably do not want to float all of the content inside a container. So let's work on this a little bit more. Oftentimes what you want to do is have a column on the left, perhaps your second column float to the right, the third column be in the middle, and then here's my footer, and have it obviously on the bottom. So let's fix this page so that our columns are going in the right spots. Back to my style sheet. I want P1 to float to the left, and I'm going to make it a little bit less than 35%. I will make it 30%. Save, refresh, and now I have my first paragraph floating to the left. It's a little bit narrower, 30%. I'm seeing my yellow background because paragraphs 2 and 3 are now not floated, so the main parent container is not collapsing. Paragraph 2, I'm going to float right. And let's also make its width 30%. So now I've got my main paragraph, my main column, my first column floating left, my second column floating right, and the third column is allowed to take up this particular space. But you still see that the main is collapsing to the height of the third paragraph, not to the height of the floated paragraph, paragraph number 1. The main background is only appearing as tall as the non-floated content. So if I really wanted this yellow background on my entire page, I'd have to pick a different container other than main to apply it to. Let's go ahead and do a common div ID equals outer wrapper and wrap all of our content in that outer wrapper. Here's a nice way to make sure you know what div you're closing. Ends outer wrapper. And let's change this selector to # outer wrapper. Now we have our yellow background throughout our web page. Our footer, however, is also in the float, and it appears to be in the correct place now. But watch what happens if our paragraph 3 gets a lot smaller. I'll just delete a few of these sentences. Delete, save, refresh. And now our footer is also floating up into this extra space because paragraph 3 does not take up enough room to push our footer down. Therefore, almost always want to clear the float at some point. And in this case, we want to clear the float at the footer. And we do that with clear both. So once you start a float, you almost always want to pick the paragraph or pick the block, pick the content, pick the element where you want the float to be cleared so that you don't get those crazy results. To fix this padding situation, we want to add padding to the main container, the main element, and set that for everybody. And let's do padding of 2 M's across the board. Save, refresh. And now everyone in the main section is receiving the same 2 M's of padding. Let's set the background color of the footer to white and remove that red border. And to do that, we'll simply go back to the footer and do its background color to white. We've removed the border, save, refresh. And because the background color is applied to the outer wrapper, which includes the footer, but the footer's background color is more specific to that element. If a child of outer wrapper, the white background color applies to the footer, and we have our full yellow background color on all 3 columns in the main section, regardless of how tall our floated elements are versus our non-floated elements. Thank you for listening.